Mia Thompson had always believed in the quiet stability of her life. The mornings were simple and predictable, coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over Boston's brownstone streets, and the soft murmur of the neighborhood waking up. Peter, her husband of 10 years, would sip his own coffee, scrolling through emails, occasionally glancing at her with a smile. Life was ordinary, but it was comfortable, and that comfort had felt like love. Until one evening, that comfort began to crumble. It started innocently enough. Mia had been planning a small dinner party for a friend's birthday and wanted to confirm the restaurant reservation. Peter was distracted, as usual, with his work emails, so Mia picked up his phone to double-check the details. That was when a notification popped up from someone she didn't expect, Sophie. Her heart froze. Sophie was her neighbor's niece, a young woman who had recently moved to the city to attend graduate school. She had always been polite and cheerful, nothing more than a friendly presence when they passed each other in the hallway or at community events. But this message thread, it suggested something deeper, something that Mia couldn't ignore. She read the messages quickly, feeling a wave of disbelief wash over her. The words were casual, even friendly, but the familiarity, the laughter, the subtle closeness Peter displayed, it was enough to make her stomach turn. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't she noticed? Questions piled up, racing faster than her thoughts could follow. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she put the phone down. Pretending to herself that she hadn't seen anything, Peter arrived home later that night, cheerful as always, unaware of the turmoil simmering inside his wife. "Long day?" he asked, dropping his bag by the door. "Fine," Mia replied softly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wanted to scream, to confront him immediately, but a quiet, icy voice inside her whispered to wait. She needed to understand, to process, before making any accusations. The dinner they shared was awkward, filled with polite conversation that felt hollow. Mia caught herself watching Peter's hands, the way he laughed, the way he leaned back in his chair. Every gesture, every small motion now carried a weight she couldn't ignore. When he mentioned the office, she found herself tense, wondering whether his casual words hid the secret she had glimpsed in the phone messages. The next morning, Mia awoke with a restless feeling. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, wondering how a relationship she had always thought secure could feel so fragile overnight. Peter was already gone, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait up." Mia traced the letters with her finger, feeling the distance in his absence. For years they had shared mornings together, brief but intimate moments. And now even that was gone. As she prepared for work, Mia couldn't shake the memory of the messages. Sophie's name seemed to hover in her thoughts, bringing with it a swirl of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and, strangely, curiosity. Why had Peter felt drawn to her? Was it admiration, loneliness, or simply distraction? Mia's mind spun with questions that had no answers, leaving her unsettled as she locked the door and stepped out into the crisp morning air. She ran into Sophie later that day at the local grocery store. Sophie greeted her with a warm smile, unaware of the storm brewing in Mia's mind. Mia returned the smile mechanically, nodding as if nothing had happened. But inside, the encounter stirred a strange mixture of emotions. There was no malice in Sophie's tone, no flirtation intended, just a young woman chatting easily with someone she considered a friendly adult in her life. Yet the laughter, the ease of the conversation made Mia's chest tighten. She realized then how far Peter's attention had drifted. Not necessarily in action, but in thought at work. Mia tried to focus on her tasks at the publishing office where she managed the editorial schedules. She organized files, answered emails, and prepared for a meeting, but her mind kept returning to Peter and Sophie. Every time she typed a sentence or reviewed a document, she felt a pang in her chest. A quiet reminder of the fracture she had glimpsed in her marriage. The world around her moved normally, but inside, her thoughts were turbulent. That evening, when she returned home, the apartment felt unnervingly quiet. Peter wasn't there yet, and the dim light cast long shadows across the room. She sat on the couch, staring at the muted cityscape through the window, trying to understand what she felt. She wanted clarity, but instead she felt confusion. Anger, yes, a little. Heartbreak, certainly, but also a curious awareness, a realization that she had been neglected in subtle ways for some time, and that Peter's connection to Sophie, however innocent or misguided, had brought that truth into sharp focus. When Peter finally returned, he was cheerful, kissing her lightly on the cheek, completely unaware of the storm that Mia was barely holding in check. "Busy day?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly, forcing normalcy. Her heart raced, and she realized that the day's encounters had changed something fundamental. It was no longer just about Peter and Sophie. It was about her feelings, her trust, her place in her own life. Later that night, Mia sat on the porch with her journal, writing down her thoughts in long, flowing sentences. "I don't know what he feels or what she means to him, but I know that I cannot ignore my own feelings anymore. I need to understand what I deserve and what love should really feel like." The pen paused mid-sentence as she stared at the dark street, the faint glow of the lamplights reflecting off the wet pavement from a passing drizzle. She realized something else. Too, that love was not only about trust, but about attention, presence, and care. For years, she had assumed that love was constant, that it was enough to exist silently alongside each other. But the messages from Peter, the laughter of Sophie, and the cold distance that had quietly grown between her and her husband had shown her another truth. Love needed nurturing, acknowledgement, and visibility. Mia felt a swelling determination. She would not let her marriage disintegrate silently. She would confront Peter, not with rage or accusations, but with honesty. She would demand clarity, understanding, and most importantly, mutual care. And if that wasn't possible, she would find her own path to self-respect and emotional fulfillment. Before bed, she glanced once more at Peter, who had already fallen asleep with the television softly playing in the background. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muted sounds of the city. The gentle hum of the streetlights, the occasional car passing by, the distant chatter from neighbors were all part of the world she had once taken for granted. But now they felt like reminders that life was fragile, and trust could be shaken in a moment. Mia knew one thing clearly. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be questions, conversations, perhaps arguments. She might discover things she didn't want to know. But she also knew that clarity and truth were worth more than quiet ignorance. Her heart felt heavy, yet strangely alive. She understood that heartbreak could awaken her, not just wound her. And as the night deepened, she whispered to herself, a quiet promise echoing in the stillness. "I will face this. I will understand. I will be seen, and I will not settle for less than the love I deserve." Outside, the city slept unaware, but inside Mia, a storm had begun, not of anger, but of clarity, self-awareness, and determination. The first step had been taken, and there was no turning back. The phone buzzed softly beside her. Another message from Peter. The words were casual. "Can we talk tomorrow? I feel like things are slipping between us." Mia held the phone in her hand, feeling a strange mixture of dread and hope. The conversation that awaited them would decide the future, not just of their marriage, but of her own sense of self. She closed her eyes, letting the silence fill her mind, and for the first time in weeks, she felt ready to face the truth, however painful it might be. The morning after discovering Peter's messages, Mia woke with a strange heaviness pressing against her chest. The sun spilled through the blinds, casting soft stripes of light across the bedroom floor, but she felt none of its warmth. Peter was already gone, leaving another note on the kitchen counter. "Busy with meetings today. Don't wait up." His words were polite, casual, but they cut sharper than any argument. It wasn't just the messages with Sophie, it was the realization that Peter's attention could drift so easily, that his focus could shift to someone else while she felt invisible in her own marriage. Mia dressed slowly, her mind replaying the previous night over and over. She wondered how long Peter had felt this way, whether Sophie had ever realized the unintentional pull she had over him. and how much of their own love had faded without either noticing. By the time she stepped out into the city streets, she felt a mixture of determination and fear. She needed clarity, but she also feared what the truth might bring. As she walked to the train station, she tried to imagine the world as normal. The streets buzzed with the rhythm of morning commuters. Taxis honked at impatient drivers and shopkeepers called out their greetings. Mia moved among them, but every smile from a stranger, every passing glance seemed to mirror her own unease. At the office, she kept herself busy organizing schedules, reviewing manuscripts, and fielding calls. But her thoughts continually strayed back to Peter. Later that afternoon, she ran into Sophie again at a local cafe. Sophie waved enthusiastically and came over to chat. "Hey, Mia. Fancy seeing you here," she said, her bright smile illuminating her face. Mia returned the greeting with a polite nod, her voice clipped but calm. "Hi, Sophie." They made small talk, but Mia felt the sting of every laugh Sophie uttered. The ease of her posture, the gentle sparkle in her eyes. It was clear that Sophie had no intention of causing harm. She didn't know about the messages about Mia's heart quietly unraveling. Yet the presence of this young woman, so vibrant and unaware, reminded Mia of what she had lost in subtle ways: attention, focus, and emotional closeness with Peter. When Mia returned home that evening, the apartment felt heavier than usual. The soft hum of the city outside seemed amplified in the quiet, and she felt a pang of loneliness sharper than any she had experienced in years. Peter arrived later, smiling and tired, dropping his keys on the counter. "Dinner's in 20 minutes, he said, casual as ever. Mia nodded, feeling a strange mix of resentment and longing. She wanted to confront him, but she also wanted to understand him. She wanted to hear his voice admit mistakes, acknowledge neglect, and offer a path back to each other. She realized then that anger alone wouldn't restore trust. Honesty might. After dinner, she asked Peter to sit down with her. The soft light of the dining room lamp illuminated the kitchen in a warm glow. "Peter, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "I saw your messages with Sophie," she continued, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I know something is happening between you two, and I need to understand." Peter's face paled, and he looked down at his hands, avoiding her eyes. "Mia, it's not what you think," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been distracted, lonely maybe, but nothing happened physically. It was just attention I didn't realize I was giving. I didn't mean to cross a line." Mia's chest tightened. "Attention." "You laughed with her, shared stories, talked in ways you never talk to me anymore. And it hurts, Peter. It really does." He reached for her hand, hesitating. "I know, and I'm sorry. I've been blind. I've taken you for granted, and I didn't see how much you were hurting." Tears threatened to fall, but Mia held them back. She realized something important in that moment. Heartbreak didn't always come from betrayal and action. Sometimes it came from neglect, from a quiet absence of presence and care. Peter's words were a start, but they weren't enough. She needed him to show her that he saw her again, not just said it. The days that followed were tense, but reflective. Mia noticed subtle changes in herself. She spent time journaling, walking in the park, and reflecting on her needs. She realized that she had neglected herself as much as Peter had neglected her. She deserved attention, care, and emotional intimacy. She deserved to be heard, truly seen, and appreciated. This self-awareness became her armor, preparing her for the difficult conversations yet to come. One afternoon, while preparing files at the office, Mia received a message from Sophie. It was innocent, casual. "Hey, Mia, I hope you're having a good day. Want to grab coffee sometime?" Mia's first instinct was irritation, but then she paused. Sophie had done nothing wrong. The young woman was kind, friendly, and completely unaware of the strain she had inadvertently placed on Mia's life. Mia realized that the situation wasn't about blame, it was about truth, honesty, and attention within her marriage. That evening, Mia decided to confront her feelings fully. She called Peter to meet her on the porch after dinner. The rain had started, soft at first, and then steady, creating a gentle rhythm on the roof above. The scent of wet earth and fresh rain filled the air. Adding to the surreal intensity of the moment, Peter came out, umbrella in hand, and looked at her with uncertainty. "Mia, what's going on? I need to know where we stand." "Peter," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I need honesty, clarity, and attention. I need to feel like we're in this together, like I matter to you again." Peter lowered the umbrella, letting the rain soak him slightly. "I've been blind, Mia. I've allowed distance to grow between us. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you or neglecting you." "Sophie? She's just a friend, but I see now how my focus on her highlighted what we've lost between us. I want to fix that. I want to fix us." Mia's eyes welled with tears. Relief and sadness intertwined, forming a knot of emotion she hadn't felt in years. She realized that Peter's neglect wasn't malicious, but it had caused pain nonetheless. What mattered now wasn't the past hit, was whether he would act to rebuild their bond over the next week. Mia noticed subtle shifts. Peter stayed home from work a bit earlier, asked her about her day, and genuinely listened when she spoke. The small gestures, the way he held her hand while cooking. The quiet attention in conversation began to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. It wasn't instant. Healing rarely is. But every smile, every laugh, shared again, added threads of connection back into the frayed fabric of their relationship. One evening, after a long walk in the rain, they returned home dripping wet but smiling. Mia realized that heartbreak had taught her resilience, self-respect, and clarity. She understood that love required presence, attention, and care, not just words, but consistent action. She had confronted her fears, acknowledged her pain, and discovered strength she didn't know she possessed. Peter, sitting beside her on the couch, held her hand and said softly, "I'm sorry for everything. I promise to see you again every day in all the ways I should have." Mia looked into his eyes and saw sincerity. She realized that healing wasn't about perfection, it was about willingness, effort, and honesty. And while the memory of Sophie's laughter or presence might linger in the corners of her mind, it no longer carried the sting of fear or betrayal. Instead, it served as a reminder that neglect, not malice, had caused the fracture, and that conscious attention and care could repair even the deepest wounds. That night, as Mia lay in bed beside Peter, she felt a quiet sense of renewal. The apartment was warm and safe, and the soft glow of the streetlights outside created a comforting atmosphere. She whispered to herself, a promise echoing in the silence. "I will not settle for neglect. I will demand love, attention, and honesty. And I will cherish the person who chooses to give them to me." Outside, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent to human hearts, yet within that quiet home, a fragile and precious reconciliation had begun. Mia understood that love could be rediscovered, not just in grand gestures, but in small, everyday actions. The road ahead would require effort, patience, and openness, but for the first time in weeks, she felt ready to walk it with courage and clarity. The weeks following Mia's confrontation with Peter were filled with quiet reflection, small gestures, and a slow rebuilding of trust. The tension that had gripped their home softened, replaced by a tentative warmth. Mia had realized that heartbreak did not have to define her life. It could be a lesson, a catalyst for clarity and strength. She still remembered the unsettling messages and Sophie's easy laughter, but the sting had dulled. What mattered now was what she and Peter could create together. Peter had been consistent in his efforts. He stayed home from work earlier, set aside distractions during dinner, and asked meaningful questions about her day. But most importantly, he listened, not in polite, half-attentive ways, but fully, with focus and care. Mia noticed the change most in small moments. A hand lightly brushing hers when they passed in the kitchen. A smile lingering after a shared joke. A quiet acknowledgement when she spoke about her own desires and frustrations. These simple gestures carried more weight than any grand apology. One rainy afternoon, Mia took a walk alone through the park. The rain fell gently, soaking the paths but leaving the surrounding trees fresh and vibrant. She thought of Sophie, of the distance Peter had created through neglect, and of the quiet storm that had passed through their lives. Mia realized something important. She had been given a second chance. Not because Peter had been perfect, but because she had demanded attention, honesty, and presence. She understood now that love was not a passive state required active care from both people. Returning home, Mia found Peter preparing tea. He looked up from the counter and smiled softly. "You're back early," he said, handing her a steaming cup. She accepted it, the warmth radiating through her hands and into her chest. The gesture was simple, but it spoke volumes. She realized that this was how change was meant to happen. Quietly, consistently, without drama, yet deeply affecting the heart. "Peter," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I need to tell you something." He set down the kettle and gave her his full attention, a small but important sign of respect. "I've spent these past weeks thinking about us, about what I deserve and what love really looks like. And I've realized that I want to move forward, but only if we continue to be honest and attentive to each other. I can't allow neglect or distraction to ever divide us again." Peter nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "Mia, I promise you, I've seen my mistakes and I've learned from them. I'll never take your presence for granted again. You've always been the center of my world, and I'm going to show it every day, not just in words, but in actions." Their conversations became a new kind of intimacy. For the first time in months, they spoke openly about their fears, desires, and dreams. Peter admitted how easy it had been to drift toward Sophie's companionship, not because he loved her, but because he had neglected the very connection that existed with Mia. It was a difficult admission. But Mia felt relief in his honesty. She didn't need perfection. She needed truth. Over the next few days, Mia began noticing subtle yet profound changes in herself as well. She was no longer consumed by worry or jealousy. Instead, she felt a growing confidence in her own worth, an understanding that her emotional needs were valid and deserved attention. She spent more time engaging in her hobbies, painting and journaling, and even began organizing small social gatherings at home, creating space for laughter and connection in their lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mia and Peter took a long walk along the city's riverside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement and distant greenery. They walked in silence at first, their hands occasionally brushing. Then Peter took her hand gently. "I remember when we first met," he said, smiling faintly. "I used to hold your hand like this everywhere we went." Mia squeezed his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. "And now?" she asked, teasing lightly. "Now I hold it with intention," he replied. "I see you, Mia, every day, in every way I should have before." The honesty in his tone, combined with the sincerity in his eyes, stirred something deep within her. She realized that the fractured trust could be repaired not by ignoring the past, but by consciously choosing attention, care, and love in the present. That night, as they returned home, Mia felt a rare calm. The apartment, once heavy with tension and unspoken pain, now carried a quiet warmth. Peter poured them both a glass of wine, and they sat together on the couch, talking about everything and nothing, memories of their early dates, hopes for future vacations, and even dreams that had been set aside during years of routine. The connection was tender, real, and present. A week later, Mia received a message from Sophie. She opened it cautiously, expecting a reminder of past unease. But it was innocent, simple. "Hi, Mia. I hope you're doing well. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime?" Mia smiled softly, realizing she no longer felt the pang of jealousy or fear. Sophie's presence was harmless. It was the past, not the present. Mia decided to respond kindly, understanding that their lives could coexist without emotional interference, as long as boundaries and honesty remained intact. As autumn approached, Peter continued to make subtle but meaningful gestures. He left notes of appreciation on her pillow, remembered small details about her day, and even joined her for morning walks. The slow, consistent attention rebuilt the bond that had been strained. Mia realized that healing didn't require perfection, it required consistent effort, honesty, and the willingness to see each other truly. One quiet evening, Mia sat on the porch with Peter, wrapped in a blanket against the chill. The rain had started softly, a gentle rhythm against the roof. She looked at him and said, "Thank you, Peter, not just for apologizing or promising, but for actually showing me that you care, that you see me." Peter smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I see you, Mia, every day. I won't let you feel invisible again. You've reminded me what love really is, not just a word, but an action." The rain fell around them, steady and calming. Mia realized that the storm of emotions, the heartbreak, and the fear of neglect had all served a purpose. They had reminded her of her own worth and forced Peter to recognize the importance of presence, attention, and honesty. Love, she understood now, wasn't passive. It needed to be nurtured, respected, and lived intentionally over time. The echoes of Sophie's laughter faded into the background of their lives, replaced by the quiet, consistent intimacy that Mia and Peter had worked to restore. They laughed together, cried together, and shared moments both ordinary and profound. The bond they rebuilt was stronger, not because the past had been erased, but because it had been acknowledged, understood, and healed with intention. One night, as they watched the city lights from the porch, Mia rested her head on Peter's shoulder. "I feel like we've found our way back," she whispered. "We have," Peter replied softly, "and we'll keep finding each other every day." Mia realized that love wasn't about avoiding mistakes or challenges. It was about facing them, understanding them, and choosing to stay fully and intentionally. She had learned that heartbreak could awaken resilience and clarity. That neglect could be corrected with attention. And that trust could be restored through honesty and care. And though she would always remember the uncertainty, the messages, and the quiet fear of losing Peter, it no longer held power over her heart. Instead, it became a lesson, a reminder of her strength, her worth, and the care that true love required. That night, as the rain fell steadily, Mia closed her eyes, feeling peace and renewal. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I will always honor my heart. I will demand love that sees me. I will nurture the connection that matters, and I will never settle for less." Outside, the city slept, indifferent to human struggles, but within the small apartment, love had been rediscovered. It was not perfect, and the journey was ongoing. But Mia knew one undeniable truth. She and Peter had chosen each other again, with honesty, care, and the awareness that true love required presence and attention. The storm had passed, and in its place was a quiet, tender, an enduring connection, a love renewed not by chance but by choice.